So, endangered languages, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the language danger classification. So, it's a system measuring, as you can see on the left, how endangered languages are. So, most languages are safe. It's got on the right there, so that obviously includes English and all of the world's most spoken languages. And then you can go around and see how they get more endangered. We're going to talk about that on the next slide. So, endangered languages are basically the languages that risk of vanishing because there's a reducing number of people speaking it. So this can come as a variety of reasons, which we're going to talk about in the next slide. But basically, the way they determine how at risk a language is, or they call it language vitality, is with these 9 things. So intergenerational language transmission, which basically means passing the language on from one generation to another. So you did that by teaching kids. And then absolute number of speakers, so just everyone that speaks it. Proportion of speakers existing within the total global population, so that would be percentage. Language use within existing contexts and domains, so obviously a language that is used to pass laws in the media, conversationally, that's pretty safe. If it's only used sometimes, then it's probably in more danger. Like there are some languages that are only used for religious scripts and otherwise they're not used. They would probably be considered somewhat at risk at least. Response to language use in new domains and media, that's basically what I've said before. Availability of materials, that's pretty straightforward, just how easy it is to access stuff from that language. Government institutional language policies, that is an interesting one, especially historically, because a lot of the reasons, as you'll learn soon, that languages can become endangered is because of policy. So basically governments making rules about what languages are used for things, and sometimes assimilation as well, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And then community attitudes, as well as amount and quality of documentation. Probably less so important than the first one, but yeah, I guess the attitude the community has towards the language would impact it. And the amount and quality of documentation, I'm not 100% sure what that means, I'll be honest, but yeah, that I'm sure anything to do with material in that language would definitely impact it. As you can see on the right, you've got the UNESCO classification. So down the bottom is safe, not endangered. That's English, obviously, and most languages, as you can see on the previous slide. And you've got vulnerable, definitely endangered, severely endangered, critically endangered, and extinct. The 4 in the middle are the states of endangerment, and then extinct is no longer exists, as I talked about in a previous video. So as far as causes go, there's 4 main types of causes of language endangerment. So physical danger is one of the most obvious. So you've got war and genocide, obviously, which is basically anything that physically impacts the population of people who speak it is obviously going to have an effect on the language because there's no one around to pass it on. So yeah, a lot of native populations have lost their languages, like their languages have disappeared just because they're small communities. So if too many people dying has more of an impact on them because there aren't that many people who speak it in the first place, whereas obviously English, even if a whole country died, it'd be terrible, but the English language would be fine. Natural disasters as well kind of have the same impact. Anything that's just going to harm people will obviously have an impact on the language, just particularly the more the harm is or the less the people that actually speak it. And then prevention and discouragement, here are the 4 reasons. So you've got marginalisation, which is, a lot of it is historical. But yeah, a lot of stuff that's happened in history isn't great, and that kind of does endanger languages when people are forced to learn other languages, that kind of thing. Political repression, that's fairly straightforward. Often when nations limit minority language, it kind of ties into the first one. Urbanisation, oftentimes urbanisation, people actually lose their language on purpose because they need to learn a new language to get work, basically, and move into an urban area, stay in a community where they might not have access to the resources they need, so it's out of necessity. And intermarriage, basically, if 2 people get married and they speak different languages, obviously they both speak each other's, but they also speak their own language, they're more likely just to adopt one, which is going to lead to any or all of the other ones basically dying out because it's just inconvenient to speak a bunch of different languages. But responses as well. So there are obviously organisations that try and stop this from happening. So yeah, organisations like UNESCO, the EU, and a few other different groups do try and save and stabilise endangered languages. It's not actually something that everyone agrees with. There are people who think that languages should be left to die out if that's what's going to happen to them, which that's your opinion. But yeah, as far as responses, there's language documentation, which is storing material on that, basically to keep it safe so we've got a record of it. Revitalisation, basically where they're trying to increase the number of speakers through awareness and stuff. So this has been done in a lot of Celtic languages in the UK that have been endangered, and then maintenance, which is basically supported languages, so they will die out unless people are deliberately enforcing them, because there's nobody really learning it. There's no particular reason to. As I said before, it's up to you if you think this is a good idea or not, but yeah, that's just what happens. And then there's also post-vernacular maintenance, which is the teaching of concepts of a lost language. So it's not really reviving it, it's just teaching about it, so they have some knowledge of it even though it's already dead. But yeah, that's basically everything to do with endangered languages. I think it's an interesting concept. But yeah, it's up to you what you think of it and what should be done about it.